to God. Now, together with trusting God, which is an intellectual type of a discipline or practice that I know God does for me what is the best and what is best for me, together with convincing ourselves at the level of our minds. When this penetrates deeper, it is known as being pleased with the discretion of God and the decree of God. So, here, what we are required to do is to give away this struggle against whatever is happening, to become fluid, accept whatever situation befalls us, and in whatever circumstances we are kept and state that we encounter, and also to become neutral from within ourselves, to not to be overly attached with our circumstances. Now let's think about this for a moment. The task at hand is for us to arrive at the fullness of our potential. For us, that means to allow God to emerge most brilliantly through our own souls within a limited time of 50 to 70 to 90 years of this life. That is our task. However, we find that we are constantly struggling against whatever life throws at us, not understanding the real nature of what is happening. We are overly involved. Think about how distracted we are in terms of health and sickness, wealth and poverty, friends and enemy, control and lack of control of our destiny, love and heartache. These are things that constantly plague our minds. We are constantly involved in these things. The emotional world is unstable. There is constant turbulence in there. Either moments of great joy and we lose ourselves, or moments of great anxiety. That's the emotional world. And then the mind or the brain is constantly thinking over, it's constantly ticking. There is a world that is being generated through the images that we are creating. And we are not even alive in the real world. We are not even present. So the life is flying by, and we are being denied at the opportunity of life. We are so involved. Now, the way out of this is to remind ourselves that we are not our bodies, and everything that is happening in this world of ours is happening within the bodily context. Our emotions are inextricably connected to the bodily realm. These are reactions and interactions with what is happening at a bodily level. If we can remind ourselves that no, we are not our bodies, we are not the bodily, we are not worldly, and by priority, our interactions with the body and the bodily are not true interactions. These are the interactions of an embodied person. I need to be a neutral being that observes these actions and reactions and interactions and grows through it. So there needs to be a distance that we create between ourselves and what we call the dunya, the world. And we need to understand that I'm arbitrarily, artificially, and superficially a worldly creature. Essentially, I'm something else totally. So that when sickness befalls me, I do not fall into worry. What will happen to me? Will I die? Will the sickness worsen? What is the cure? I have a form of cancer that the medical world doesn't understand very accurately. And even if I were to be treated, how lengthy will the treatment be? Will I suffer during the process? Will I die during the process? If it comes to chemotherapy, Will I lose all my hair? Will I become ugly? Will I become old and frail? Is it better for me to die? Will I suffer? Will others suffer? All of these things are not us, but all of these things will consume us, endlessly consume us until we breathe our final breath. And at that point, we will realize that no, this sickness was the sickness of the body. The body was paining. I needn't have suffered. And if initially I suffered, that suffering was for me to absolve myself of the body and the bodily, and then to grow beautifully through that sickness. Or we think of being defamed or losing our fortune, and how we lose our sleep over it, and how we make bargains with God that do this for me and I'll do that for you. The God that awaits emergence through the collapse of the business empire becomes a part and parcel of the dealing process and the negotiations of the worldly scheme and the business empire. We've made him into a partner within our business as opposed to seeing the opportunity that is there for us to absolve ourselves of the false identity. Or when our hearts break, we crumble with the breaking of the heart, as opposed to reminding us that I was never supposed to identify with this love. It was an emotion that I was supposed to understand in the bodily realm. And from there, to work out the intensity of love that awaits me with my beloved, who has reflected himself in the form of the love of my heart, which has now been taken away, so that the eternal love may enter. So we find that the first thing is we need to remind ourselves that, look, I am not sick, my body is sick. I am not collapsing. It's a false identity that is collapsing. I am not becoming poor. It's the body that is becoming poor. How wonderfully Imam Hussein reminds himself. He says, Oh Allah, you have taken care of me so wonderfully in my yesterday. If you have destined for me a tomorrow, shall you abandon me if that tomorrow comes? I can never assume such a thing of you. If you keep me alive for tomorrow, you will cater for me for my tomorrow as you catered for me in my yesterday. When enemies come upon us, these are the enemies of a false personality. Why am I getting so offended? Why do I have to interact with the situation so personally and so intimately? These are the enemies of a false personality that has been constructed around my body and bodily. I need to remind myself of that. This personality has to crumble, to crush, to fade away in order for me to gain back myself. So once we engage in this process of reminding ourselves that I am not the body, not the bodily, nor the emotions generated through the bodily realm, I needn't have to interact with them in such a bitter way that I'm interacting, or in such an involved way in which I am interacting. Then in that case, we can then step back and start assuming that point of neutrality, where emotions are coming and passing by, where I can reclaim my presence and am not deluded and wasting my life within an imaginal world, which is not really real. If we can arrive at that point of neutrality, then we get a brilliant perspective into what is happening. We say, here is our life. God has constructed it so well in order for us to experience notions of joy and grief, success and failure, love and heartache, so that we may, through all of that, find the real success, the real joy, the real love. And if we can have that perspective, then we will say, oh Allah, indeed, you're the author, you're the master, You're the eternal lover. You can only destine that which is best for me. So, here now, not only do we trust God at an intellectual level, but at the level of our hearts, we do not struggle against the decree of God. And we should know that if whatever happens in this world is a decree of God, then our parental God, the loving companion, cannot decree anything that is bad and evil for us. Imam Hussein states in that dua of his, and I think I have repeated it several times, that, O Allah, allow me not to yearn for you to delay a destiny that you have chosen to hasten to me. In our simple terms, O Lord, if you have destined cancer for me, allow me to embrace it. Of course, I'm going to fight against it, but I will not be involved with it, nor will I interact with it so intimately that it rids me of my sleep and preoccupies my mind. No, I will interact with it to a level to which I need to overcome it, but be satisfied with your decree and not struggle against it. Let me not turn to you and say, why me, O God? What wrong have I done, O God? Or allow me not to say that, oh God, is this a punishment of the wrongs that I have done? And allow me not to say to you, oh God, why do you not listen to me? And why do you not respond to me? No. Allow me to be dignified, to say, oh Lord, if you have chosen this for me, then my first task is to thank you. My second task is to overcome it. My third task is to be content with whatever transpires and not to internally struggle against it. O Lord, if you have chosen wealth and health and fame for me, allow it not to define me. Allow it to be an experience that I am experiencing. Allow me to thank you for it, first of all. Then allow me to turn to you in humility and to acknowledge that this is not me. I am a soul involved with you with utmost humility. Let the richness, the health, the beauty, the love not define me. Let it not distract me from you. And then, if it perpetuates, then allow me to thank you for destining it and experiencing it. But the greatest damnation for me would be that if this joy were to prevail upon my soul to the extent that I lose sight of you. When enemies come, O Lord, allow me not to be offended in there and feel hurt. And if I do, then allow that to be a form of therapy for me to know that I still have a raging ego that feels hurt when I have enemies and people say things to me that are uncomfortable for me to hear. Let me thank you that you have offered me an opportunity to relieve myself of a false personality that gets hurt when people speak ill of me. And then Imam Hussein says, Oh Allah, allow me not to plead to you to hasten a destiny that you have chosen to delay. What this signifies is that state of beautiful internal neutrality and being pleased with God. Now, if we arrive at that level, what that does is it liberates us from a false personality that has been constructed through our association with the body and for us becoming bodily. Once it liberates us, what happens there is that the real being that is inside begins to emerge and grow. What is inside there is the spark of the divine. As Mahmud Shabastari says, oh you, if you could take a broom and clean the Kaaba of your heart, of all the false deities, you will find at that time that the Lord of the inner Kaaba will assume his throne and you will arrive at where you need to be. If only you knew that you are strength unending, you do not need the armies of the world. If only you knew you are wealth in which there is no poverty. you would not yearn for the treasures of Solomon. Of course, I am adding and paraphrasing. If only you knew your life beyond death, you will not worry about the life of your body. But we have to arrive at that point of neutrality where we can arrive at the pure understanding of really what is going on. Or as the Sufi masters say, like Rumi, that O you who learns through rot, you have to always remind yourself of what you have learned. If you can only cleanse your heart, you will find the oceans of knowledge shall flood from inside onto your tongue. Or as the Blessed Prophet said, he who sinceres himself for 40 mornings, they will find the springs of wisdom pouring from their hearts upon their tongues. If we can neutralize ourselves and become detached from the body and remind ourselves that we are not bodily and be pleased with the decree of God and to know that God decrees only the best, then at that point, there is that first opening from within, that the real being now that is not preoccupied with the body can begin to shine. Now, if we can also remind ourselves that the Quran says that on that day of Qiyamah, you will turn to me and say that the life of our worlds was only an hour. It was an illusory world. The Prophet has said people are asleep. When they die, they awaken. If we can remind ourselves of this truth, then we will know that no, even though 70 years seems like a lengthy phase of time, and 24 hours are a huge span of time when somebody is irritating us or when we're feeling sick. If we can remind ourselves that all of this is but a moment, and if we can take life by the minute, let me remind myself in this minute that this is an experience and no more than that. It is not real. Then maybe we can learn to convert those minutes into hours, hours into days, days into weeks, weeks into months, months into years, and we can lead a very profitable life in which the true light of God emerges through our confines.